Well, hello there, friends. Thanks for clicking on this video and joining in on what is a continuing conversation. I hope this video finds everybody doing well and in good spirits, and as you can tell, it's a lot brighter in here. Yes, I did invest into an overhead LED lighting system just simply because the days are getting darker sooner. And I like being out here early in the morning, and there's just not enough light on some of the projects that I have been doing recently. And the biggest project is the last time I shot my flintlock, I noticed, I didn't record it, but I did notice that a couple of the times I pulled the trigger, the hammer didn't fall all the way down. And usually that's a good indication of your fly wearing out. So I replaced the fly, and I also replaced the sear at the same time. And I needed a lot of light to see what the hell I was doing when it came to that. And of course, you know, this particular flintlock that I have, it is 25 years old. So it's probably the point of its life where little pieces like this need to be replaced. So I did that. The gun works fine now. And I'm going to get out and test a couple of gunpowders. This particular video and this test is going to be the Eastern Red Cedar, that is the pet bedding, versus the Red Cedar heartwood only. So let me give you a little bit of information regarding this topic. And if you see a huge displacement in the video, or like a huge cut or something like that, the battery's about to go dead. They were both fully charged this morning, so I don't know what's up with that. But anyhow, if it looks a little funky, it's because the battery died. A little while back, I was doing some rereading some information in my Boyer's Bible, and in particular regarding specific gravities of wood. And this particular paragraph mentioned that the heartwood had in pine, mind you, had a different specific gravity than the sapwood. And that's what caused me to think about making some gunpowder from the red cedar heartwood. So that we all understand what I'm talking about, here's a piece of Eastern Red Cedar, and you can see an obvious color change. That white creamy color, that would be the sapwood. If you were going to make a bow out of this, you would want all of that sapwood gone so that you could get directly to the heartwood, which would be basically the core of the wood. I've got a couple of bigger pieces here that are glued together. You can see that's all heartwood. There's a little bit of sapwood on that side. Now generally the sapwood contains more moisture than the heartwood would, and that's why that comment was made in Boyer's Bible about the specific gravity of the heartwood of pine would be different than the sapwood. Okay, and kind of give you guys an overall look-see. Here's a piece of pine, and you can see the growth rings, and the growth rings can tell you whether this wood has gone, what type of seasons the wood has gone through. Now, pine being an evergreen, you can see that the growth rings are fairly consistent because it's an evergreen. Okay, but when you come down to something like hickory, it's a piece of hickory and end grain, you can see that some of those growth rings are a lot thicker than others. So that tells you that that one particular year, it was a pretty mild winter, long summer perhaps, and that tree had an opportunity to grow a little bit longer. So you get thicker growth rings. Okay, here's a piece of oak. Now there is a little bit of a grain change because this is the glue up, but if you look at the main piece of that oak, and if you can see it and the camera's picking it up, you can look at those growth rings and determine what type of seasons this particular oak tree went through. Okay. And this one here is, if you can see, I kind of burned it, but you can see this one growth ring right here, I hope, is pretty thick. So that was a pretty long growing season for this piece of oak, which would, if you cut it green and try to make gunpowder out of it, is probably going to be a little more heavier because the wood's not dried out. Okay, here's a piece of black walnut. You can look at these growth rings and see what type of growing season it went through. A lot of your specific gravities are based on that. Here is a piece of maple. I've got some marks on the end. I don't know how well you can see the growth ring, but this is actually tiger maple. If you look at those growth rings, you can see the growing seasons that this piece of maple went through. Now, in case you didn't know, one of the reasons why they call it tiger stripe, because at some point that maple tree gets so big it starts collapsing in on itself. It becomes a weaker wood. So it collapses on itself, and then you end up getting these tiger stripes, what they call curly maple or tiger stripe maple. A lot of that may or may not. In fact, let me just show you this view. This is the view I wanted to show originally of this piece of maple. Now, we should all recognize that maple actually has a pretty long growing season. Otherwise, in the spring, you wouldn't be able to get sap. So this tree actually starts drawing water and converting the water into the sugars early in the season. And it's one of the last trees to, leaves turn red and fall off. So it has a long growing season, and you can see that reflected in the growth rings. Okay, so when Swiss uses buckthorn alder, buckthorn alder has a very, I don't want to say very specific growing season, because up in Canada or wherever they get their buckthorn alder, or where the alders are, you could have long or short growing season depending on when your snow start flying and all of these type of things. So that's why Swiss seasons their wood for 3 years. Because if you have some sapwood mixed in with the heartwood, all of that wood balances out. And that's one of the things about building bow that a bowyer has to know. So what I've done with all of that information and knowledge, I've got some eastern red cedar that was pet bedding that I made gunpowder out of. And then I have some eastern red cedar that's just heartwood only. And I'm going to test these two gunpowders to see if there's really any difference in the velocities through the chronograph, bearing in mind that the eastern red cedar that I made out of pet bedding, the gunpowder that I made out of the pet bedding, I pucked with a 2-inch pucking die. So I'm gonna weigh these two out, and I'm gonna keep them separate with two different measurers, so that if there's a little bit of a weight difference in what is the pet bedding that has the sapwood in it, I can kind of like keep that separate and run those numbers based on the weight, knowing that the weight of the gunpowder pucked with a 2-inch pucking die is going to be a little bit lighter. All my loads will be settled, and one on the board. If I got juniper, this is the juniper, and this is actually alligator bark juniper, and you can kind of see, because it's an evergreen, all of the growth rings are real tight and compacted. And you can almost see the shade difference in the heartwood. But because this wood is the way it grows here, and it's an evergreen, I'm not overly concerned with just using the heartwood. Although I've mentioned before, at least I think I did, I use the limb because the growth rings are the tightest in the limbs, which would be a more evenly grown limb. That's why a lot of bowyers like building bows out of the limbs, because the grains are tighter and they're more stronger than, say, the base of the limb, the base of the tree that has wider and larger growth rings. So anyhow, I hope that was as clear as mud. I'm going to get my powders weighed out, and these things marked. Well, they're pretty already marked. One of them's newer and one of them's older. So I'm going to get these weighed out. I'm going to get the shooting range set up, and I'll meet you out there promptly. So just to remain consistent, Eastern Red Cedar pet bedding, 30 grains. Let's see what it does. Did that seem kind of slow to you guys? Did me. Let me give you a close-up of the block. That looks pretty dirty to me, guys. But make up your own mind. Let me get 30 grains of the Eastern Red Cedar Heartwood and see if there's any difference in them. Okay, Eastern Red Cedar Heartwood, 30 grains. Wow, that went up a whole heck of a lot quicker. Yeah, it looks a little dirty, doesn't it? But compared to the other one, there's no smoky residue. But comparing the two, the Heartwood Red Cedar went up a lot quicker, a lot faster. But let's see what it does in the gun. Well, here's one noticeable difference already. The Eastern Red Cedar, the pet bedding, on my scale, I weighed out 70 grains by weight, and that's occupying 90 grains by volume. That's the pet bedding. The Eastern Red Cedar gunpowder that I made out of the Heartwood, 70 grains by weight, occupies 80 grains by volume. That's already a huge difference. Let me get the camera turned around. I have to re-sight in this gun at the same time, even though I mentioned I sighted it in. When I took my center punch to peen over a little bit of that metal to keep that sight in place, I think it moved. We'll find out shortly. I can see that one high. Let me get your number. 1567. $14.71. $15.25. Well, I found two of those patches. They're shredded right up, and these are 20 thousandths patches. Must be burning pretty hot to do that. At least I think so. Well, I'm going to get reloaded and get you a couple more numbers. $15.40. Shot number 5, $15.68. Yep, $15.68. All right, I'm going to get target swapped out and get reset up for the Eastern Red Cedar Heartwood only. $15.41. So just to let you know, I did not clean out the barrel. I'm just shooting this with a dirty barrel. I'm going to walk up and mark off the target, get reloaded, and get you guys another number. And just to let you know, I am using Shoots in 4F. And as you can see, I did have to vent pick it, and I had to vent pick it one time with the pet bedding. So in my book, that's an indication that it's a pretty dirty burning gunpowder, at least in a flintlock. But let's see what happens with the rest of this. $16.07. $15.93. So I've only been able to find one patch thus far. It's not shredded like the others, and it's a lot cleaner looking. That might speak a little bit to using heartwood. If you're going to use Eastern Red Cedar, you make up your own mind. I'm going to get loaded up, get you some more numbers, and I'll show you what the target looks like when I get back into the shop and give you my overall opinion about this particular video. $16.07. Yeah, that was the last shot. What was it? 19. All right, I'm going to go mark off the target, pull it, and I'll see you in the shop. Okay, so you might be interested in what my opinion is of what I just did testing these two gunpowders. Well, I shot the Eastern Red Cedar pet bedding first, and I showed you the patches. They were pretty dirty, and they were very disintegrated. I picked up 3 of the 5 patches from the Eastern Red Cedar. That's the heartwood. Now let me clarify something here, just so that I'm not trying to be dishonest or anything in any of this, especially what I just did right here. Around here in New Mexico, what people call Eastern Red Cedar, the heartwood is more purplish than it is this color. Okay, it's more purplish in color, but everybody around here calls it Eastern Red Cedar. And when I first saw this cedar several years ago at a rendezvous, everybody assured me this was Eastern Red Cedar. Now, I don't know if the groundwater and the minerals causes the heartwood to be more purplish. That I don't know. So just take all of this with a grain of salt, okay? Now, with that out of the way, here's one of the patches that I recovered from, and I'll call it the Eastern Red Cedar heartwood only. You can see that that's a lot cleaner, and the patches were not disintegrated. I actually recovered 3 of them, and they were very similar to this. They were not shredded, and they were pretty clean as far as the burning is concerned, in my opinion. Now, let me show you something else. Okay, I did not record this, and as I mentioned in the video earlier on, I was not going to clean out the gun barrel between shooting the Eastern Red Cedar pet bedding and the heartwood Eastern Red Cedar. Just simply because at this point I think it's irrelevant. I really do. I think it's irrelevant, especially with this gun in the way I shoot. Okay? But I will tell you that after I shot the pet bedding gunpowder, I did have to clean out my flash pan because it was dirty. I showed you the patches and you could see how dirty they were. Now I had to vent pick it one time because it was dirty. Okay, now having cleaned out the flash pan, and I didn't use water, I just kind of used my thumb and a little piece of cleaning patch and kind of cleaned it out. I didn't thoroughly clean it at all. Now bear in mind, as I said, I was shooting Schutzen 4F, or at least I think I said that, but I was shooting Schutzen 4F. And with that 4F, I did not see on the side of the barrel any smoky residue like you do right here. And I'm hoping the light and everything can pick it up. I hope you can see the smoky residue right in through here. I'm going to move it around a little bit. Hopefully you can see it. Maybe get a little closer and you can observe it. Now the reason why I'm mentioning this is because with that Eastern Red Cedar pet bedding, I think that fouling covered over this fouling that you can plainly see now, because in my opinion it was just that much dirtier. And like I said, I had to clean out the pan. I did clean out the underside of the flint, you know, the frizzen face and all of that. But from this perspective right here, let me see if I can get this out into the sun and give you guys something a little bit better, because as I look at this, you know, this flash pan now, yeah, it's dirty, but it doesn't have that, you know, that wet, greasy, dirty look to it. And of course, the sun went behind a cloud, but I'm going to try to see if you guys can look at that pan and observe for yourself just how dry looking that is. And like I stated just a few moments ago, after shooting that gunpowder that I made with the pet bedding, it was much, much more greasier, wet looking, like it was moist. Oh, here comes the sun. Let me see if I can give you guys, if you can see that in the sun. So for me, that was a noticeable difference in these two gunpowders. Now, as I had mentioned previously, I resighted in that flintlock and I wanted to make sure the sights were still going to be on, because when I punched it, I thought I moved the sight. Now, just so that you know, you can refresh everybody's memory, this was sighted in with GoX, 70 grains by volume, not by weight, 30 yards. And that's what she sighted in at. Okay. Now, when I had the camera turned towards the target and I shot the gunpowder with the pet bedding, that's what it threw. And I thought, crap, I gotta resight this thing in. Now, the average 5-shot was 1534.2 with a spread of 97. And like I said, I thought I was going to have to, you know, resight this thing in. But I didn't adjust any of the sights. Now you saw me shoot the gun the last 5 shots. And there's the last 5 shots. Number 5 cut. Number 2. I think I'm going to leave the sights where they are. You know, that's pretty good. And it was benched. All of this was done at 30 yards. Now, the average of the Eastern Red Cedar Hotwood the average velocity was 1609.4 with a spread of 78. And obviously, it printed a whole hell of a lot better than that pet bedding did. Because I actually thought I was going to have to readjust the sights. That shows I didn't have to. So I'm going to go ahead and 86 all that charcoal that I made out of the pet bedding, just simply because this test right here shows me that the pet bedding that has the sapwood blended into it might hinder a better performance from Eastern Red Cedar as it pertains to pet bedding. Fortunately, I don't have a whole lot in here. And bear in mind, as I mentioned earlier, this was pucked with a 2-inch pucking die. But just thinking back and how it reacted in my flintlock, I personally thought it was a little slow igniting. And I'm not so quick to blame that on the 2-inch pucking die, because I've done other tests with the 2-inch pucking die and the gun went off just fine. So I don't know specifically, but I'm leaning towards the sapwood not being what you would want to make your gunpowder out of. Now, with that being said, I do have, and I'm going to be testing it soon, I do have some gunpowder that I made with, 50-50 Eastern Red Cedar, pet bedding, and juniper. And I'm hoping at this point that the juniper will help the performance of the Eastern Red Cedar pet bedding. So that's going to be coming up soon. As far as I'm concerned, at 1534, will it kill a deer? Absolutely. But can you guarantee that it's going to, impact at the point of aim? I can't. But I can pretty much guarantee that that's going to impact at the point of aim. Because if I was aiming at a heart, every one of them bullets would have done its job. This would not have. Just maybe one. So anyhow, guys, thanks for watching. I hope you can take something positive away from the video. Maybe give you a little bit more food for thought. As far as I'm concerned, with this test right here, when it comes to the Eastern Red Cedar, obviously, as I just stated, I'm 86ing it. I'm not going to use it. I'm just going to stick with the Heartwood. In particular, as it comes to the Eastern Red Cedar. But at the same time, as I just said that and backed myself into a corner, I've showed previously, time and time again, my junipers can even outperform this now that I have a set of numbers to work with. So anyhow, hope you give this video a thumbs up and be willing to share it with your bestest of buds. Bye.